Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to my regular update from our nation's capital. It has again been a busy week. I'll get to the so-called Liberation Day comments in a few moments. I want to start, though, with a continuation of what was the big story last week, the absolute careless handling of classified information. It was part of a pattern. This was in terms of the use of Signal. We've seen, since the story break, a host of questions go unanswered. We still don't know if the phones were ever collected and checked for malware. As these individuals should know, you can have malware inserted on your phone. The bad guys don't have to physically have it. And some of these individuals on that phone, you can find their phone numbers on the dark web. The fact that this was handled so carelessly, I was down in Hampton Roads in Virginia Beach and Chesapeake on Saturday for town halls, and Virginians were rightfully pissed off at this careless behavior because many in the crowds I had knew folks who had been deployed on the Truman, the aircraft carrier that's in the Eastern Mediterranean, where the jets had taken off to strike the Houthis. And the fact that if this information had been discovered by the Houthis, they could have very easily or probably taken down American pilots and killed them. And then the absurd notion that this administration, who still hasn't even apologized, that this is not classified. Well, I can tell you from straight reporting of the Israelis, they are furious because some of their sources and methods potentially were compromised with this information being detailed on a non-secure channel. And again, it's just stunning to me that more of my Republican senators, who I know believe in our national security, haven't been willing to raise their voice and demand that we get a full investigation, demand that we know what happened with these phones, demand that all of these folks, I believe Hegseth and Waltz should be fired. But short of that, demand that they all go back to a National Security 101 course to stop this careless behavior. And if last week wasn't enough, we saw again early this week that the Signal uses is not the only careless, wanton abandonment of traditional security protocols. It appears that Mike Waltz and his team have sent out lots of detailed conversations over Gmail, which is not even encrypted. So how will it take literally American service members dying or being constantly put in harm's way before we can get the answers of whether the phones have malware on them, whether there's going to be any consequences? As I said repeatedly, if this had been a traditional military officer or CIA case officer who'd done this behavior, they would be fired, no questions asked. So far, we have no one held responsible. We don't know whether the bad guys are continuing to monitor these non-secure conversations. We don't know if the phones used literally have malware imposed upon them. And I'm going to keep pounding on this. I think American security depends on it. There was polling over the weekend, did one of the Sunday morning shows where 70% plus of Americans thought this was extremely dangerous, 56% of Republicans. So we deserve and demand answers, and we're going to have to get it. That leads into another story that I've been working on for some time, and that's the challenges around TikTok. We've known for more than a year, for actually a couple of years, that TikTok is a national security threat. The fact that 150 million Americans spend about 90 minutes a day on this application, the application is so smart because it knows what you like before you know what you like, and the amount of data that can be collected. But more significantly, since you don't choose what your next video message would be, is the ability for this algorithm based in Beijing, controlled by ByteDance, a company that by Chinese law has to adhere to the Communist Party of China before it adheres to any needs of customers or shareholders. We know that ByteDance can have that algorithm manipulated to be an enormous tool of propaganda. So, to recap, we spent last year 80% of the House and the Senate signed on the legislation that became law that said TikTok needs to be sold to a non-Chinese entity. We don't want TikTok to go away, we just don't want it to be controlled by our adversaries. Well, this is the law. Donald Trump punted on the law and gave an extra 75 days when the due date came, about January 19th. He's launched an auction. And let me just be very clear. I don't have all the details. I know there are at least 4 major bidders. But if the ending result is a result where the algorithm, the secret sauce, remains in Beijing, then the whole effort has been a farce. The whole effort has been a scam. The whole effort has been like so many of the Trump ventures that sound good, there's nothing there. Because if the algorithm remains in Beijing, then those 150 million Americans are still going to be subject to the kind of propaganda manipulation that I can guarantee you the Chinese Communist Party will use in an adversarial way against America. So this disregard of our national security, from how they treat secrets to how we have to stand up to an adversary like China using this technology tool, this Trump administration is getting remarkably awful failing grades. Now, in terms of so-called Liberation Day, self-proclaimed by Donald Trump, I think he's going to announce his tariffs at a point after the markets close today, about 4 o'clock. Well, the truth of the matter is, this Liberation Day is actually, I think, will be going down as tax day for Americans. Trump's own advisors have said, the tariffs will generate $100 million a year on auto sales and $600 million a year on other, based upon these reciprocal tariffs. That's $700 million. Who's going to pay for it? You and me, in higher prices. And virtually every economist across the ideological spectrum agree with that conclusion. So when those prices go up, just remember, it was Donald Trump's liberation policies that are actually increasing taxes on America that's going to make your costs go higher. It's why I was very anxious to join with my friend and colleague Tim Kaine and say, let's at least get rid of the excuse of why Trump is using tariffs to attack Canada. Canada, our longest serving ally. We go back almost 200 years of partnership with Canada. Our economies are intertwined. I've got my mom's family, we're Canadian. The idea that we've turned them into an enemy. So what Tim is doing, and I and Amy Klobuchar are his wing people on this, are saying there is no fentanyl emergency on the northern border. There is a fentanyl emergency on the southern border with Mexico, and we've got to do all we can, north and south, to stop fentanyl. But this fake emergency that allowed him to impose these tariffs isn't a fulsome emergency. We need to undermine his ability to put these tariffs in place. Now, a number of Republicans have said they will be supportive of this. A couple of them have even signed on. We'll know this afternoon whether, finally, on an issue this important, whether folks will find some courage. I'd point out that we send Canada about $3.3 billion in Virginia products. We import about $3.2 billion from Canada to Virginia. Canada is the second biggest recipient of all our agricultural products. So this will dramatically affect Virginians. I had a guy down who makes liquor, in our press conference yesterday. Canadian stores are literally taking off American liquor products off their shelves in a sign of solidarity. And one of the things that's so disturbing to me, Mark Carney, the new Prime Minister of Canada, someone I've known for some time, and I talked to him the other night, and this guy, if anybody can carry Canada through a recession, will be him. But he pointed out, not dissimilar to what the Foreign Minister of Canada pointed out to me a month or so ago, if Donald Trump got up today and said, hey, no problem, we love Canada, well, you can't put this relationship back on an even level. This will affect our relations for years to come. And don't take my word for it, just look at the decrease in Canadians traveling to the United States, down by 75%. That's going to affect a lot of snowbird tourism in Florida and Arizona. It's going to affect, obviously, a lot of the trade in terms of purchasing of American products. Canadians have a right, frankly, to, I think, be upset. I don't understand how we can make Canada an enemy. But that is what is playing out by both Trump's insults to Canada and now by these, I think, almost illegal tariffs. And what we hope we'll be able to do is prove that illegality this afternoon in a Senate vote. So, as always, lots going on. And why don't I turn it over to Laura and be happy to take your questions.
Senator, our first question is Mark Sellinger with Export Compliance Daily.
Thank you, Senator. Just to, not echoing too much here, I was just wondering on TikTok if the deal that's announced still leaves China in control. What options, if any, does Congress have, and what's your sense of Republicans going along with any of those options?
Well, it'll be interesting to see whether the literally 80%, and it was about equal percentages of Republicans and Democrats, whether the issue that under Biden they saw as a national security threat, whether they're going to lose their courage under a President Trump. Nothing has changed in how TikTok operates. Nothing has changed other than the fact that more young Americans are getting their news from TikTok and hit dead in the center of TikTok's ability to be a propaganda tool. So it'll be a good test. It'll be a test of whether these guys want to be strong on national security. But I have to say with a little bit of trepidation, the fact that I've not had more Republicans who've all said to me privately, I'm aghast at what's happened with these signal chats. I'm aghast that there's not better security concerns, but they haven't found their voice to do that publicly. That does not bode well. And let me just tell you, that is bad for national security. It makes us look weak. If on something like TikTok we don't enforce it, it makes us look weak. If we don't hold people accountable for this kind of security lapse, it makes us look weak with our allies. I can assure you, America first shouldn't mean America alone, and that is where we're headed. America alone with no friends or allies, and all of that undermined by, frankly, the ego of one man.
Senator, our next question is Dwayne Yancey with the Cardinal News. Sorry, we have to move on to Dwayne.
Okay.
Hello, Senator. My question is, are there impacts of the Trump cuts in Virginia that haven't been reported yet that we ought to be?
Yeah, Dwayne, there's, we're still seeing, the fact that while the funding freeze is suddenly supposedly unfrozen, there are a number of entities around Virginia that are not getting dollars. I know there's a number of rural health centers in Southside and Southwest that have had to lay off people. So I'm unsure in the last few days whether some of that funding started to flow, but earlier they had to lay off folks. I can tell you this, the economic development projects that I worked with the governor on, of the additional money for Volvo, the money for the plant outside of Danville in the large operation there in Pittsylvania County, a project in I believe it was Chester. Those funds haven't come. And so where the localities have spent dollars and time and effort, getting a site ready, if it doesn't come, that means those local dollars are being poured right down the drain. And where I think some of this is going to have to come, and people keep asking me, what can we do? What can we do? Well, one of the things you can do is raise these concerns to your local elected officials, to your local board of supervisors, to your local state legislators, particularly if they're Republican. Because so far, the cuts have been to red areas, blue areas. A lot of the economic development projects I just talked about were in communities that President Trump won by about 75%. And if they are, willingly walking away from those, you can imagine what's happening in any kind of project that helps the underserved and minority communities. So they're getting double and triple whammies. So, we've got to put this to an end. We've got to return to basic rule of law. I think it's going to come from changes from national security, where finally people will say enough's enough, but it's also going to come from local elected Republican and local elected officials being willing to have the courage to speak out when their communities are being hurt by these, in many cases, illegal cuts, where he is basically refusing to follow congressional directive.
Senator, our next question is Ethan Kraus with Wavy News.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. I know you touched on it a little bit in your opening remarks, but could you tell us what do you think the tariffs on Canadian goods, what effects will be felt in specifically the Hampton Roads region of Virginia?
Well, if you've got any two areas that are going to be hard hit are breweries, because they buy a lot of the Pilsner and hops and stuff, not Pilsner, but the hops, I believe, from Canada. We had a brewer down yesterday. He's already laid off 20% of his workforce. I know it'll be the case if we got any liquor distributors in Hampton Roads. Their market to Canada is going to basically disappear. But think about peanuts. We've got Southeast Virginia, got a lot of peanut farms. Canada is the second biggest buyer of Virginia peanuts. Well, you put a big tariff on that, that's going to go away. So there's virtually no part of the economy that won't be hard hit. I mean, we go back to the auto tariffs. It's estimated between $2,000 and $5,000 per car of cost increases. I mean, it's kind of wild. We've spent 20 years, including Trump's first term, where he renegotiated the trade deals with Canada and Mexico and put his signature to that, where, particularly in terms of cars, we've tried to integrate the two economies to be more efficient. Trump is trying to unwind all that. And as I said, Liberation Day is going to be known as Tax Day going forward, and people will start seeing these prices go up, I think, by the end of the week.
Senator, our next question is Caitlin Harlow with WRIC.
Hi, Senator. My question specifically pertains to the Postal Service. So what is your response to the federal government's plans to cut thousands of Postal Service jobs, considering that Virginia, especially the Richmond area actually, consistently ranks as one of the worst places in the country for on-time mail delivery?
Well, Richmond and actually Charlottesville as well. I think it's outrageous. The Postal Service actually outdates the founding of our country. It is the only agency that's mentioned in the Constitution. And while I had critiques of the former Postmaster General, Mr. DeJoy, he literally had the post office back on a path to profitability. Their last quarter was the first quarter in the black, literally for years. So for that, doing the hard work of trying to reform the post office, because it does need reform. The amount of first-class mail has dropped by like 70%. DeJoy doing what would have been viewed as a Herculean task. What was his reward? Well, he got fired. He got kicked out. So any effort to privatize the post office, any effort to sell off its pieces or again give private business a better deal than what taxpayers receive in terms of shipping costs, we got to fight tooth and nail. And Americans, I think, widely show they respect the post office. We all have complaints about when a mail's late, but at the end of the day, the fact that we get deliveries 6 days a week is awful darn important. And I can assure you, any efforts that Trump would have to privatize it would mean the level and quality of service would drop dramatically.
Senator, our next question is Brendan Patton with WTKR.
Hi, Senator. On the bill to remove the tariffs against Canadian products, kind of what's your viewpoint on how many Republican votes this might have? Is this going to be close to 60, do you think? And then do you have any faith the House would actually take up this bill?
Well, good news on this one, it actually only needs 51 votes. So assuming all 47 Democrats, that means you got to get 4. I think there are more than 4 Republicans who've expressed concern. But we have seen, and I saw this, for example, on the Tulsi Gabbard hearing, where I thought I had 4 Republican senators who were going to vote no on her. And I know they would wish they would have had those votes back now, since she seems to be a compulsive liar. But I have to give it you, through threats, so far people have not been willing to actually vote their conscience. They've fallen into this complete subjugation to Donald Trump's whims. It'll be interesting to see whether we can pick up 4 or 5 or 6 Republicans today. I know we're all going to make a hell of a try, and again, I want to give Tim Kaine a lot of the credit for raising this and pushing this issue.
Senator, our final question is Amy Knowles with the Virginia Dogwood.
Hey, Senator Warner, thanks for taking our questions. I wanted to talk to you a little about the Healthy Food Access for All Americans Act. I know that food insecurity continues to grip many Virginia homes. So how would this act help to combat that issue?
Well, thank you, Amy. Upwards of 60% of Virginians live in what's called a food desert. That means you live, if you live in a rural community, you're more than a 10-minute drive from some place where you can get, fresh fruit and vegetables, fresh meat, fresh fish. It means you're more than a mile in an urban area from a place that sells those goods. In rural communities, we know there's a lot of places where you can stop at a convenience store, but at a convenience store, the ability to get healthy food is really pretty low. So this is bipartisan. Jerry Moran, the senator from Kansas, and I have taken the lead on this and said, let's put a tax incentive in place to build more, groceries, food markets that sell fresh fruits and vegetables, that sell fresh meat or fresh fish. We've tried to say, let's take advantage of things like food trucks that can sell those kind of commodities as well. It doesn't cost that much. I don't have the exact number. We'll make sure to get it for you. But the idea of trying to incent Americans to eat healthier, that's what we thought we were going to get with Robert Kennedy. He said he wanted to lead to a healthier America. Instead, unfortunately, what we've got so far out of Kennedy at HHS is firing scientists, chasing away folks who are in favor of vaccines, and all of the kind of wacky theories not promoting healthier food choices has been the output so far of the Kennedy HHS, and I think that's a mistake. All right, everybody, thank you so much.
Final question.
Stay tuned.